Hello? Hello? Okay.
Does
Hi,
anyone
everybody.
need our handout? Anybody need a handout? Mr. Marshall, thank you. Good to see y'all. You're welcome. Welcome. Would you like one?
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. I am Lorraine Eberhardt, one of the wardens here. I'm a 9 a.m.er, and I usually sit right there in the front couple of rows, so it's fun to be at the 11 in the very back today. And kudos to those of you who are also 9 a.m.ers and came all the way back, so thank you. I have the easy part. I'm just going to introduce Brad Jones, our other warden, who will get us started.
Thank you, Lorraine. And good morning, afternoon. As many of you may know, we have a vestry board of elders that's made up of 9 men and women who wisely and prayerfully help lead our church. Every November, December, we have a vestry election to elect a new class of wardens. They serve 3-year terms, 3 each, 3 times 3, you get 9. Are folks familiar with the vestry, the responsibility in general? Okay, I'll tell you a little bit more about it anyway. Each member of vestry serves as a liaison for a different area of our church life. Many also sit on the committees that they advise the vestry of things like finances, our treasurer, facility, outreach, personnel. And in addition to each member's individual area of oversight, vestry meets monthly to advise our rector and make decisions related to the church finances and facilities. So you may be thinking, what makes a good vestry member? Well, try not to scare you off here. And I do encourage folks to think, as I'm reading through these characteristics, about whether you may have an intention to pursue serving on the vestry or nominate someone who would. First, we're looking for a mature Christian committed to the orthodox doctrine, discipline, and worship of the church, and not someone who's recently come into the faith. Secondly, they should be temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, gentle, not quarrelsome, and have a good reputation with those outside the church. Third, they should be someone who maintains an active life of prayer and study of Scripture. Fourth, they should be known and respected among the church. You guys still with me? Fifth, they should have a strong record of serving the church and cheerfully giving to the church of their time, talent, and treasure. Sixth, they should have a family relationship that honors God and reflects a strong Christian commitment. Seventh, they should have enough time to able to serve effectively as a vestry member. And finally, they should make a commitment to put vestry service high on their list of their personal priorities, particularly for those 3 years. And again, in general, vestry meets about 10 times a year, Tuesday evenings for a few hours. You've got a couple hours with a committee that you have every month, and then there's usually another hour or two of general prep and getting ready for committees. All right, so our timeline this year, I'm going to read off of this slide. Starting today, nominations are open, so be thinking over the next 2 weeks who you may want to nominate yourself. Do include some information and some justification for it. On November 19th, David will email out the vestry slate and a bio book. I think most of you are familiar with this. I do encourage everyone to read through it, think carefully. The people who are being considered for vestry put a lot of time into this, and will help inform your decision for some folks you know or may not know. And then November 28th through December 5th, we will vote via SurveyMonkey. If you remember, we did that again last year. I think we're there permanently now instead of the boxes that used to be outside and carefully guarded. But that's it. I again, encourage all of you to think and pray about who you may want to consider nominating and then selecting for vestry. It's a fun team. So thank you. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Vogel our treasurer. He's got some beautiful slides.
Hey, everybody. So my name's Dan Vogel. I'm second year on vestry this year. I'm serving as a treasurer. So I want to quickly give a rundown. We close our fiscal year at the end of August. And so I want to summarize a little where we landed for last year and then how we're thinking about stewarding the funds that God has provided for us through you for furthering his kingdom here at Restoration. So three key messages. One is just we are in a really healthy overall position. And there's a number of reasons why that we'll talk more about. But again, fundamentally, it's about God's provision and faithfulness and your generosity. And then there's also some realities of COVID that have meant that we're spending less money in some places than we normally would. The net result of that is we've got not only a surplus from last year, but a really large amount of cash on hand. So we've been thinking for much, frankly, of the last year, how do we steward that? How do we invest that wisely? And there are two key ways that we're thinking of, that we then acted in terms of trying to use that well. One is we're about to execute a refinance of our mortgage where we're able to make a significant reduction in the debt, the mortgage debt that the church carries, and put us in a position where we can potentially pay our mortgage off in 10 years, which is super exciting. And the second is then thinking about our FY22 budget and frankly, like leaning forward a little bit to say, we actually feel more freedom to invest, to grow, to build our staff team, and so excited to unpack a few of the places where we're trying to invest going forward this year. If I click through, one of the key drivers of how much money we have at our disposal is a function of how many people are part of this body. That's been a hard thing to track over the course of the last couple of years because it's obviously been very different in how we've been worshiping. But this chart just gives you a picture of in person. You see the trajectory from those very sad early months of the year when we were really limiting the number of people in this room, and then as restrictions were kind of relinquished, and then eventually we had, after a summer dip, if you go back one, all of a sudden we have kids small groups and more than 400 people in the course of September, what you've all been experiencing in the pews, which has been amazing. At the same time, we still have, the next chart, if you would turn it, Chris, thanks, this very steady group of people that's still out there on YouTube Live, still tuning in. And one of the key questions throughout the last year and a half is trying to gauge how many humans are behind a unique viewer on YouTube Live. Because for every one person, you've got a family like mine that at different times would have had 5 or 6 people that might have been coming in and out of the room and trying to pay a little bit of attention. The assumption that we've been making, if you go to the next slide, is that there are on average 2 people for every YouTube Live viewer. So what that results in is a picture that would put us somewhere, averaging 630 attendees over the course of the last year, and again, really spiking above 700 over the course of what September looks like so far. So again, we're not sure how precise that is, but to put that in context, in the early months of 2020, before COVID hit, we were averaging about 615 attendees on a Sunday morning. And if you look at the 5 years prior to that, from 2015 to 2020, we averaged year-over-year growth of about 4% in attendance. So if that trend continued, that would put us in the neighborhood of 650 attendees, and that feels about right in terms of what the data seems to be showing. So that's about what we think is somewhere between 650 and 700 people worshiping here at Restoration, which is amazing and exciting, and just to see the way that God's continuing to grow our community. Any questions on any of that before I get into these numbers? They are, I think. Mm-hmm. Great. So this is FY21. These are the categories we used to sort of track our numbers every month. The bottom line, what matters is we had both more generous giving, so 6% above the giving that we projected, and expenses that were 3% lower. The result is that green box where we had about $110,000 surplus. We would normally budget to not have any surplus. We basically try to budget right at neutral. And so this year, irregular, but a meaningful surplus. And potentially even higher than that, we excluded the Clergy Development Fund, where we raised more than $100,000 to support the ongoing work of the new Clergy Development Plan with our own Chris Lugo as the first beneficiary. So that's the overall picture of where we landed for FY21. If you go forward a slide, so this is a picture of our cash on hand, and we would normally say at a minimum we want to have at least 3 months cash on hand. Comfortably, probably 4 months is a better position. Just allows us to weather different fluctuations. Because of first the 10-year anniversary gift, and then a series of the way that again we've been able to sort of both save some money in costs foregone, and also because of Restoration's generosity, we've been at a point where we've had really way more cash than we want to have. So we're now at a point where we have almost $1.2 million in our general fund. And so as we've been watching this picture, again, thinking about how do we steward that money well, it really led us to a path of saying, if you go to the next slide, how do we look at, and in addition to the general fund, we also have a building fund, a reserve fund, that you kind of put it aside if we need to replace the roof, we replace the HVAC system. We spend out of that on a regular basis as we need to, but we've frankly been operating in a very conservative posture with that building fund. So between our general fund and the building fund, we had a really meaningful amount of assets at our disposal. That led us down a path of saying, with this cash, with the interest rate environment that we had, we should really aggressively look at our mortgage and say, can we pay down a big chunk of this debt in a way that puts us on a path toward being debt-free sooner and enabling more of our resources essentially to go toward kingdom work as opposed to interest on this beautiful property. So that's what we did for the last several months. We got a broker. We've been looking at a bunch of different quotes from the marketplace. We were kind of evaluating how aggressive do we want to try to be. We want to try to be as aggressive as possible while still not putting us in a position of kind of undue risk from a cash flow standpoint. And where we landed was saying from our current mortgage balance, which was around $2 million, we were going to pay down $600,000 of that, taking some money out of the general fund, some money out of the building fund. So we'll have a new mortgage balance of $1.4 million. We've got a great rate. It's amortized over, it's a 10-year term, but amortized over 30 years. And we were able to do all that with our current lender, which allowed us to save a lot of money in closing costs and the like. So this is a really exciting plan in my mind, partly because if you go to the next slide, what it means is our mortgage payment actually got cut in half. We were paid around $12,500. That new mortgage gives us a monthly payment of around $6,200 a month. But Vestry decided, let's basically assume we're kind of maintaining that same level of payment, which will allow us to, again, really aggressively pay down that principal. And that would, if we pay, that same amount, right around $13,000 a month, that puts us in range of being able to pay it off in about 10 years, which again, I think is amazing. And our hope is it's kind of a gift to not only the community now, but to future folks who are sitting in these pews to say, you don't have that burden, and you've got more resources to kind of, bring God's work to bear in other ways. And again, what we were trying to do all along was balance, like, how do we do that aggressively in a way that both preserves enough money for the other things that we will need, both to take care of the physical property, but also to weather a set of things that we may not anticipate. So, we expect to close this transaction by November 1st. So we're kind of going through all the final appraisals and all that sort of stuff right now, but we'll close soon. And then you'll see a new picture, which will be a reset, and I think in a good way for us. We'll have a bunch of those balances will come down, but we're still comfortably at 4.5 months of cash. And again, an amount in our building fund that we feel confident will cover the physical needs that we've got in the coming years. I just said a lot. Does anybody have any questions about that whole? It's obviously a huge transaction in the life of our church. Any questions about any of that? Go ahead. Oh, right. So we were debating, and so Chris maybe I don't know, I'm not going to put you on the spot now, but there's a series of both upgrading the sound, potentially thinking, are we going to have to sustain some version of YouTube Live? But it's basically a set of physical upgrades to the audio or video or sound system that we've been also deliberating around. We excluded those from the FY22 budget. Basically said, let's effectively make those investments out of the surplus from last year. This was just, when we were looking at the full picture, we wanted to make sure we were taking those expenditures into account in kind of having a real understanding of how much cash was going to be left on hand. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Yeah, I think the answer would be the general fund, which basically gives freedom for David and the staff team to kind of deploy it as they want is optimal. Any other questions around the mortgage? Okay. Again, what I would underscore is like the excitement among the vestry for this plan is just a sense of we've got ability to, so we'll look in a second at the budget, to have like a meaningful portion of money that's just going toward paying debt that we're going to free up over time and more quickly, I think, than some people had hoped. So then, just to give a rundown on FY22. If you go to the next slide, Chris, one of the pieces of context I think that's worth understanding is how, if you look at the budget picture, over a number of years, starting in FY16, we grew year over year at about 10%, and then in each years we exceeded, the green just showing we basically were on par or exceeding what we expected to do. Then there was this blip in FY19 where we had a big miss. There was a series of factors that led into that, but like the net result was that for the group of people that were on vestry that time, it was a pretty hairy year in terms of trying to figure out how to navigate it financially. It also, I think, effectively spooked us from a budget planning standpoint, in that we then said, rather than to continue that growth trajectory, let's put the FY20 budget, or the FY20 budget basically on par with where we were in FY18. Last year, we would have otherwise said, okay, let's take a step forward, but it was right as COVID was happening, and we made the judgment call. There's a lot of uncertainty. Let's kind of keep things constant. The net result is we've had a budget that's been kind of depressed for the last couple of years and has constrained a little bit of some of the things that we could be otherwise doing. And so we're taking a meaningful step forward in budgeting next year. Our FY22 budget, which is about $2.1 million, is a 10% increase over last year, which feels like a lot. But if you look at it as a 4.8% increase over the actual amount of giving, I think it's actually proportional if we had kind of maintained what that budgeting trajectory would have otherwise looked like, absent a couple of those kind of factors that contributed to that. Happy to talk in more detail about any of this, but I think the next slide is probably the most meaningful one. This kind of gives you a picture of how the funds are distributed. And so the pie chart just kind of shows both, we're able to be more generous with our outreach dollars. We're trying to, obviously, there's about 19% of the spending that goes towards kids and youth and all the work that Luis and Ryan and Lexi are leading with the help of a lot of you. The chart on the right just shows how is that different from where we were last year relative to this year. And by trying to take the cost of our people and divide them up and say, okay, if we think about David's time or Ryan's time or Nathan's time, and split out the cost in terms of where they're directing their time and energy, this kind of gives you a picture of what that looks like. And the rows in green give you a sense of where we're really trying to grow. So both, Kat's role has enlarged. We're also hiring a new person as an operations coordinator to support her because she's got a lot on her plate. We're trying, Ryan and Lexi have stepped into new roles in driving Apex. We're trying to find a kids small group coordinator to help Louise with kids because there's tons and tons of kids and young people in our community. So those are a couple places where we're really trying to lean forward a bit with our investments. And again, the cost of the curate is not reflected. So that's is not reflected in this budget because it's being paid out of the Clergy Development Fund. And those one-time upgrades to our worship, our sound system, also won't be reflected in this budget, but it's another place where we're meaningfully investing. So again, lots of information I just ran through. I'm happy to stop and answer any questions on our budgeting for next year. Go ahead. Yeah, so on the prior slide, personnel category is kind of one of the accounting categories that we track every month. And administrative is sort of like a series of kind of, what's a practical example of an administration charge, Kat?
Like any giving fees, so if you give online, those fees and anything associated with that, computers, other techniques that are staff.
Office equipment, that kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, yes, we put, so Louise is excited about the prospect of potentially hosting a VBS next summer. And so we've budgeted for that, which could be awesome. We also budgeted, I should have flagged on the other new, is for some of the efforts that are happening around racial reconciliation, racial justice. We've put intentional dollars there as well. Mitch? I think it's basically toward equipment, right? Yes, so it's in the worship category. Any other questions? Okay. Well, David, you've got a question. But it's, so if you see Brendan Sorum, Brendan did a ton of work to drive the mortgage process. Huge credit of thanks to him. And Kat, on an ongoing basis, does an amazing job. She makes my job and the job of the finance team pretty easy because she is such an exceptional administrator on behalf of Restoration. So, awesome. Thank you.
Is it working? Great. Thanks, Dan. I'm just going to talk about a few staff updates. The nice thing about being on a smaller team is that we all have the opportunity to trade some job responsibilities around from time to time, but I realize for the congregation that can get really confusing. So I'm going to highlight a few of those things, particularly amongst our clergy staff, because they've had the most shifts this particular year. So we'll start with Nathan Dickerson. Nathan is still going to be your go-to guy for all things related to adult small groups. He will also lead Resto Men this year. He's recently taken on the role of overseeing our connections and membership in a more official capacity. Many of you already know that Nathan is one of the best connectors on our team, and that man loves to meet new people. So it's a perfect fit. He's also heading up our marriage mentoring program. Beth will be your contact for prayer and contemplative retreats, things like Sunday morning after service prayer that happens here, prayer services, and one-off retreats. Beth also recently completed her training in spiritual direction, and she's offering that to our congregation now as well. You can sign up for that on our website. She will continue to lead our Resto Arts program and coordinate baptisms, and she's the lead for the new Restoration Clergy Development Program that we've talked a little bit about recently. Scott started his official role as assistant rector on September 1st, and Scott leads our ministry to young adults just as he's been doing the last year and a half. He recently took on outreach and will serve as our outreach director. And then we've already talked about Chris Lugo. He's our curate, and he's sitting right here, and he's a participant in the clergy development program, which means he gets to shadow all of the people I've already mentioned. And then as a reminder, I'll go over the other ministry directors and coordinators that we have on staff. So Chris Stevens in the back, Director of Worship Arts, which includes all music and audiovisual needs. Louise Brooks, our Director of Kids Small Groups. I'll talk more about her in a minute. Lexi McMahon, our high school Apex coordinator, and she's also overseeing Sunday volunteers. And then Ryan Goyer, our middle school Apex coordinator, and he still oversees the facility as well as a few communication items. So like I said, I know as exciting it is for us to get to trade some things around from time to time, I know it can be confusing for all of you to remember who to contact when you have a question. So the best resource for you is always our Contact Us page on our website. There's a long list of options that you can choose from on that page, and your email will always end up in the right inbox. Alternatively, you're always welcome to email me, and I can get you to the right person. So then last parish meeting, I told you we were thinking creatively and strategically about how to add some capacity and ways to expand our team. And one of the ways that we hope to do that is by hiring a full-time kids small group coordinator to step in alongside Louise Brooks. Fun fact, the size of kids small groups downstairs is about the size of a large church plant. And so we're looking for someone to join our team to help maintain the same safe and welcoming environment that you have come to know and love here at Restoration for our kids. This person will partner with Louise to continue building that strong ministry for both kids and their families. We know that in order to keep growing this ministry, we need someone who loves Jesus, loves kids, and loves families. You may be that person. Or maybe it's not you, but you know someone that you could tell about this job. I know David wrote in a recent rector's update that people in our congregation, and especially those of you here at this meeting, are some of our best recruiters. We'd love for you to think about someone you know who would be a good fit for this role and for our team, and for you to tell them. We've extended the application deadline to this coming Friday for that role. It's October 8th. We're also hiring an operations coordinator, as Dan mentioned earlier, and we'd love to add 1 or 2 more people to our Sunday nursery team. The information about the operations coordinator job is on our website, and anyone interested in the hourly work on Sunday mornings can contact me or Louise Brooks directly. Does anyone have any questions about any of that? Great. So remember, Contact Us page, email me, and tell someone about the kids' ministry job. We'd love to have them. I think David is next.
Thanks. I just wanted to come up and give you all a chance if you want to ask anything of me or anything else from the meeting, and then I'm going to close us. So we're like 3 minutes away from this being done, unless you have questions. But I'm happy to answer anything you want to ask. Yeah, Kevin. Yeah, it's my hope that the clergy development program would continue and would have multiple participants. There are a number of people who could use 8 to 10 months in an Anglican church like ours for their seasoning and formation between seminary, or maybe they're coming out of a different church tradition and just need to learn how to be Anglican in a context like ours, and before they're moving on to a more permanent job. So we really imagine that this is a place where we could develop lots of clergy, and so men, women, people of color. We would love lots of folks to be able to come through our church who are looking for permanent positions. It's about so part of it is like we raised more than what we needed for this first year, and that will be part of the fund that we put together for next year. It's our plan that we'll start recruiting in January for participants, and also begin fundraising early in 22 for a class that could come in next summer. Does that answer kind of your question? Yeah. It's been great, and we've really enjoyed it. Thank you. Yeah, Will. Yeah. Yeah, great question. I'm going to answer it with like 3 different ways. So first of all, our OST, which is our outreach steering team, they're looking to ask the vestry to set aside some of our outreach dollars just as a small church planting fund. And then I think as we bring people through the clergy development program, some of them will have a call to church planting. I anticipate that that could be a regular thing. I know that our diocese really wants to plant 40 or 50 churches in the next 10 years. Again, maybe 5 would be great, but let's see how it goes. And then I'll just also mention Liz Gray has announced that she is retiring next May. She and Simon are headed back to the UK. So they will be going through their own rector search as they do that. But I would love for there to be more church plants that we're a part of. It's been a great honor to be a part of Morgan's, and the one that happened, or Incarnation's the one that's closest to us. I anticipate there'll be more. Yeah, Anita. Great question. We do not have any plans for internships right now, but we have had interns in the past. We've had seminarians, for example, in the summer. I think that creative directors could say, I could really use an intern in this particular spot, thinking like kids ministry, youth ministry. So those are always things that we are open to considering. We just don't have them created in as formal a way as the clergy development program right now. But great idea, and one of the things that we want, which is to develop people. What else? Okay, I'm going to tell you about 3 things I'm really excited about. That's going to take approximately 45 seconds. So first is Apex. I wish I could explain how much of an answered prayer what's happening in Apex is. It's just really fun to have watched it explode. Ryan and Lexi have done a great job building a team, and they have a vision for what's happening in high school and middle schoolers. And this place actually needs an Arlington police officer every Sunday. Don't tell anybody that I said that publicly. Take it off the YouTube. But like when I drive up on Sunday nights, it's crazy. Just people picking up their kids. We have the parking lot full of games. That's what we want. Vibrant life for our 6th grade to 12th graders as they think about Genesis 1 to 3, and they're asking questions about what does it mean to be human and to be faithful to the God who made them. And there are lots of great conversations. So when you see Ryan and Lexi, say, great job. You guys have really come together well this fall. And then over the summer, we talked a lot about Alpha, and it has been everything that we wanted it to be. So I wanted to give us a chance just to thank Stephanie. Thank you for your great vision for it. There's a great team around her, and one of the things that Stephanie and I talked about is how do we help you multiply yourself into some other people so that it builds traction, and we have a leadership team that's ready to go in the winter. Maybe we could do this twice a year. Those prayers feel like they're being answered as well as people step into this, and I'm just grateful, Stephanie, and grateful for what's happening on Thursday nights. If you want to set, as I have, a little calendar on your phone that just says, pray for Alpha on Thursday, have it like blare off at around 7:30 p.m. I know they would appreciate that as we pray for them. And then thirdly, we've talked a lot about the fall retreat, and we gave you the deadline on Tuesday. I'd love for you to be here, and I imagine that probably everyone in this room will in some way be here, but it's also a great thing to invite a friend to either be here or to see online. David Taylor is an excellent speaker. The Psalms are a great tool for us as we learn how to pray. And we need a fun weekend where we can play and be together, and that's going to be next weekend. So I don't want you to miss it. Come for part of it, all of it, and enjoy being together as a church, even here. Last chance for any questions before I close you. All right, I'm going to pray. God, thank you for our church, and thank you for all the good news. We've had some challenging years, and in the parish meetings we've had in 2021, we've gotten to talk a lot about your faithfulness, a lot about the generosity of God's people, and about dreams that we have, and we're starting to see some of them come true. So thank you, God. We don't take that for granted. We are so grateful, and we want to be faithful to you in the midst of it. I pray that you would bless my friends as they go out into this week. Amen. Thanks, everybody, for sticking around.